Bienvenidos. We're going to talk about how to ask questions in Spanish. Questions can be divided into two basic groups. We have yes/no questions and open-ended questions that require a question word like who, when, what, where, how, or why. First, we're going to talk about yes or no questions. In Spanish, there are many different ways that are correct to ask the same yes or no question. And I have 8 examples of the same question with different grammatically correct ways to ask it. The question is, do you study on Fridays? Now, the first example is where we just take the statement, you study on Fridays, put question marks around it, and vary the inflection of our voice to get it a question. So the statement would be, tú estudias los viernes. That's a statement. You study on Fridays. But the question with question marks and inflection in our voice is this. ¿Tú estudias los viernes? So with the statement, we keep our voice flat or it goes down on the end, whereas with the question, the voice goes up on the end. So the statement is, ¿Tú estudias los viernes? The question is, ¿Tú estudias los viernes? And you can see that we have the pronoun tú at the beginning of the question. Now in Spanish, we also know that with tú, the verb form implies the informal use, so sometimes they just leave off the pronoun. So a second way to ask it would be, ¿Estudias los viernes? And just leave the two off. Now when we're asking a yes or no question, we can also put the pronoun after the verb. ¿Estudias tú los viernes? We can also put the pronoun at the end of the sentence. ¿Estudias los viernes tú? And notice that this pronoun either disappears or moves through the sentence, and all of these are correct. Now another way to ask in Spanish a yes or no question is to make the statement and then ask, is that right? Isn't that true? And so isn't that right is, ¿Estudias los viernes? No. And to ask, isn't that true, it would be, ¿Estudias los viernes? ¿Verdad? And optionally, we could put the tú on the beginning of these sentences, on the beginning of these statements. So these are about 8 different ways that are grammatically correct to say, to ask somebody, do you study on Fridays? Now, if we want to talk about question word questions where we have to use a question word to ask an open-ended question, there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. You can see that the subject can be placed in different locations in the sentence, but in a question word question, pay attention here and see where the subject is located. The first question is, when do you study? ¿Cuándo estudias tú? ¿Cuándo estudias tú? When do you study? An answer could be, estudio los martes. Estudio los martes. When do you study? I study on Tuesdays. Now another question with a question word could be, where does Anita study? ¿Dónde estudia Anita? ¿Dónde estudia Anita? Now let's look and see where the subject is in these 2 questions. The subject of the first question is tú. We don't have to put tú in there because the verb form implies the informal you, but if we did put tú in it, then it would be located at the end of the sentence. We're asking where Anita studies, and Anita is the subject. Where is Anita located in the sentence? At the end. So what do we know about question word questions? We know that we have to put the subject at the end of the sentence. Something else to keep in mind is that a question word always has an accent mark. cuando has an accent mark, donde has an accent mark, and any other question word like where, what, when, who, why, or how is going to have an accent mark. So when you're writing these, pay attention and make sure that you include an accent mark. Now, some possible answers to where does Anita study? She doesn't study in the cafeteria. No estudia en la cafetería. No estudia en la cafetería. She doesn't study in the cafeteria. And notice that I didn't put the she in because we're already having a conversation about Anita. So it's implied. I could put Anita here, or I could put ella here. I could say, Anita no estudia en la cafetería. Anita doesn't study in the cafeteria. Ella estudia en la biblioteca. She studies in the library. I don't even have to say she though. I could say, estudia en la biblioteca. Because we're already having a conversation about Anita. I know I'm talking about her. I know I'm talking about Anita. And you'll see that a lot in conversations and hear that a lot where you know who the subjects are. And so the pronoun or noun is just dropped. And the verb is just expressed without that pronoun or noun. But if we do have a subject in a question word question, it has to go at the end of the question.